around it, and they weren't happy with that. And they put a red circle around it, and they weren't happy with that. And then they put the white tabs, and they kind of liked that. And then they put a blue surround the whole shooting match, and they liked that until right at the end of the war, after the war actually, they put the red stripe, and that's what you use to sing today. However, being the U.S. government, never being satisfied with perfection, if you go look at all the airplanes we're flying today, they have some kind of camouflage on them. So what they have on the airplanes today is what's called stealth markings, and they're basically gray on gray. But it's still the idea of a circle and a tab and a surround. Let's see what else we're talking about here. As I said before, we have an array of World War II fighter airplanes that would make any air show proud, and we are just super proud to have some of these airplanes out there. A lot of the airplanes are going to taxi out one of the upper taxiways to get to the room, which I'll call them as they come by. You can see a Spitfire Mk XIV, which is not a Battle of Britain Spitfire, but it was one of the Spitfires that came out after the war, or toward the end of the war, I should say. This airplane is incredibly fast, fast enough to catch up with the German V-1, the rocket bombs. Probably warming up and then they're going to taxi out. We haven't recovered the wing yet. It's still You'll notice on the Spitfire, there's the marking on the side called a rondelle. A rondelle is only two colors, dark blue and light blue, whereas normal Royal Air Force markings are red, dark blue, and light blue. That's because they took the red out so that it wouldn't be mistaken for Japanese airplanes.
Now the Cobra is fascinating. The engine of this aircraft sits behind the pilot with a drive shaft up fast through the cockpit area into the front of the aircraft.
A model Mustang, notice it does not have the bubble canopy. It has what we used to refer to as a birdcage canopy. P-47 Thunderbolt jug, made by the Republic Aircraft Corporation out of Bethpage, Long Island. Heavy, heavy fighter. Has an R2800 engine in it, the same engine that's in the C-46 and the Spitfire again. The P-47 was the A-10 of its day. It was the tank buster. It was the ship scraper. The jug, for obvious reasons. Look at the shape of the airplane. It looks like a milk bottle laid on its side with wings. This is a P-63. As Greg was saying, very oddly built airplane compared to some of the stuff we have today, or even then. The engine actually sits behind the pilot with a drive shaft running between the pilot's legs up to a gearbox that drives the propeller. Because it's built that way, you can put a cannon or a machine gun to shoot through the propeller. It also has, if you look at it in the parts, go up and look at it, it looks like there are automobile doors on the side. They open just like a car. And a lot of times if a pilot had a favorite airplane, or he had his name or markings or something on that door, and he crashed his airplane, he would take the door from the wreckage and put it on his new airplane. Vertical stripes on that airplane. It's a D-Day airplane. Imagine in World War II,
hundreds of these aircraft in the air taking off. Or the youth, like in England, when they had to cross the English Channel, running to these machines. Just running, getting in these aircraft and going. And those kids were 18 to usually 25 years old was the average age of these pilots, especially for the English, and then the Germans were younger. But that's the other thing when you look at these machines, and this is why I say to the youth, you can do this work. Guys that were 20 years old flew these back when under a lot more pressure. So to learn to fly now, believe me, it's not that difficult. Also, too, you know, today's technology with cockpits, I mean, the things you have inside aircraft today you never had here.
Yeah, most of these airplanes, you're seeing the more successful versions of that type of airplane. A lot of them, when they were built, they didn't quite do what they wanted them to do, so they modified them and changed them or did certain things. The Spitfire, or rather, the Spitfire has a Merlin engine, great engine. The Mustang, like this A model Mustang that's going to come by, this is Thunderbolt, but the A model Mustang has an Allison. The engine did not perform the way the English wanted it to do, and they said, hey, I got an idea. Let's make a Merlin engine with that fuselage. And that indeed was a marriage made in heaven. And still not being satisfied, now they got the performance and the altitude out of the Mustang. They had to do one more thing. So in war, there's not good or bad or right or wrong. You do what you have to do to get your Air Force or your Army up to snuff. They stole an idea from the Germans. And that idea was wax-impregnated droppable fuel tanks. Look overhead, formation flying. 325, 5 As you can see, you can get this smoke in any flavor you want. And then on the outside is flying with blue smoke. And the other guys are flying with white smoke.
The whistle sound that you hear is a legendary P-51 sound. Everybody loves that whistle, and that's how you can tell, even when you can't see a Mustang sometimes when it goes by. Another thing with an aircraft like the P-47 you see here is you realize just how big it was. And when you're standing next to this aircraft, as you can do here, that's a big, big aircraft. As Ron was saying, when they came up with the droppable fuel tanks, they stayed up there for a long, long time, because then these aircraft could run bomber escort all the way to Berlin.
I want to talk about that P-63. That's a rare airplane. It's seldom seen up here. That airplane, when delivered to the American Army Air Forces, or the Army Air Corps as it was at that time, it never really worked out for us. They flew them in the Pacific, they flew them in Europe, but they wanted P-51s and P-47s, and they wanted to replace this thing. So a lot of these airplanes went over to the Russians. And what they found out is Americans always want bigger and better. So they just sort of junked the airplane up with all kinds of stuff it really didn't need. And we gave them to the Russians, and the Russians didn't really want all that stuff, so they took it off and turned it back to what it should have been to begin with, a basic fighter interceptor airplane. And they had great success with it.
And that gets back to simple. One thing with aviation, we try to keep things as simple as possible.
Overhead, the formation coming by again. Something you don't often see in modern air shows. Back in the day, large formation was the thing to see. There were literally dozens of airplanes in formations. Now today to fly formation, you have to get what's called a formation card. You have to learn to fly formation, you have to demonstrate the ability to fly formation, and every year you have to be checked out again to return that formation. So there are schools, and there are groups, especially in the warbird community, because there's nothing more impressive than a big formation of airplanes coming by. Airplanes are rounding out, they're going to recover. This particular model Spitfire is a Mark 14. The Mark 14, one of its claims to fame was taking the B-1 bomber. I'm sorry, the B-1 missile. At first they would get behind him and shoot him down, but it was literally a flying bomb, and then you had to fly through all the debris. So the English developed a technique where you flew up alongside the V-1, got your wing tucked in under it, and then gently nudged it. And then what you would do is flip that airplane over, and you'd key the gyroscope in it, you'd call out and down from the airplane, and the missile would crash. Hopefully they could do that before it got over English soil, or crash in some place where people weren't.
All right, the helicopter you just saw leave here, folks, that's heading to Airshow 3 o'clock and going to go get its altitude and get ready. It's Chuck Aaron in the Red Bull helicopter. He's been cleared to 6,000 feet, climbing on out. He's going to drop the parachute jumpers, and then he's going to bring that thing back, and you're going to see one of the most radical air show acts you've ever seen in your life. We're glad to have Chuck back here flying this year, and this is exciting. I know some people come here just for that helicopter, and if you're here for that, I advise you get over to the line to get in a place to watch it, because this is something like you've never seen before, if you've never seen it before, and if you have seen it before, you know what you're going to see.
That's why the Camarillo show is really unique. Now, you just saw Clay Lacey. That's because of the design of the airplane. As I say, when you build an airplane, rightfully so, you should never be satisfied with the airplane. It may be the best flying, best performing airplane, but if you can inch a little more performance out of it by streamlining it or doing what you want. This is an early model